Welcome back. On today's episode, I'm joined by Daniella Sr., the Dominican chef turned CEO of the Colada Shop, a DC spot that serves 7 a.m. cafecitos all the way to late night mojitos. So grab a coffee. This was an amazing episode. We get a chance to talk with Daniella about some of her background starting in culinary and how she came up with this all day affair concept for the Colada Shop, and also learn more about her expansion plans and how she's trying to grow while still keeping her Caribbean inspiration and essence alive. So this is an awesome one. Hope you enjoy. Danielle, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Likewise, I'm really excited to talk to you today. I think your story is extremely fascinating. And last week we talked a little bit about your business. It also sounds like you have some, not only a cool background of how you got into the business, but also you have some very audacious growth plans ahead for Colada Shop. So let's maybe talk today about your business, how you got here, and then also touch a little bit about what you have in store. Does that sound good?
Yeah, it sounds exciting.
Awesome. I always ask my guests to tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that you started, like myself, started doing catering. That was your entry into the food business. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got to where you are today and maybe some of your early culinary roots? Because you have a very fascinating story.
Yeah, thank you. So I started at a pretty young age with a home-based catering business in Dominican Republic. I was 13, and I was primarily at the time doing dessert catering. Borrowed some seed money from my mom and did bunch of small boxes with essentially petit fours. I did my own logo, little brochures, stickers with my phone number, and went to very grassroots marketing and just handed a box to kind of anyone that I thought would, be interested in buying. And the next day, the phone started ringing a little bit more than I was anticipating. Not gonna lie.
It's a good problem.
Really, it's a good problem, but one that I've taken to heart even to this day when with more real business, you have to be ready for the opportunity when the opportunity presents itself, right?
Absolutely.
And yeah, the phone started ringing, and next thing I know, I had a full-on catering business with 6 employees and 13 years old, which was kind of wild. And my parents had no idea what had happened to their house and how they got here. And it was pretty awesome, but pretty crazy at the same time. And kept that business all the way through when I graduated high school, in which at the time I decided to go to culinary school. So that's when I moved to the States. So went to school in New York at the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, and went to school initially for culinary arts and then did a bachelor's in hospitality management, and have worked every role and every position within the restaurant industry. So I know very much obviously how to cook, but also spent a lot of my career and time actually working with beverage, wine specifically, as well as spirits. So I've kind of really done a wide range of things, and come, I guess 2016, I opened my first brick and mortar of my business, Colada Shop, which is an all-day Cuban cafe. We currently have 7 locations within DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and growing. So that's
Oh, you
kind
make it
of
sound
fast
easy.
forward. Yeah.
You make it sound
Easy,
really
it has
easy. I'm
not
sure it
been.
wasn't that
I
way.
promise you that.
Yeah. So I really love talking with folks that started in culinary, actually worked their way into the restaurant. Just recently, I'm sure you know Andy, had him on the
Yeah.
show, and his story was really cool. What did you learn from your first couple years working in the kitchen, and also maybe some of the lessons that you took from culinary school that you apply today in the Colada Shop?
At least my school was very much like the military. Honestly, it's, French brigade system. It was
Right.
very hierarchy, and, respect was very much something that, you pay your dues, you grow through the ranks, and you wear that with a badge of honor. So I think that's something that's still very much ingrained in me, is like put in the work, be diligent, be prepared, have your mise en place, and all aspects of business. I think a culinary school for me was very much the right foundation because it instilled that discipline in me, but also gave me the appreciation to truly understand what goes into this field, what goes to every bite of food that we eat. I don't think that my success would have been possible without me understanding that, because it also gives me a huge advantage when I am able to have a conversation like with our chefs and understand exactly what they're talking about, right? Same with our baristas and our dishwashers, our bartenders. Like when I'm talking to them, I'm like, I've been there. I know what that means, right? I understand. I think we are able to connect in a different level when you can truly do the work, right? Which I have, until most recent, like I love jumping on the line and openings and running expo to this day, right? And and they're like, oh wow, she can do that too. I'm like, yeah, like any position and any role in our restaurants I can do, and I am very proud of that. I think it not only is something for me, but I think for the team to know that I'm not asking of them anything that I can't do myself, right? And I think that's pretty critical and pretty crucial. And it's just like you're not depending on someone else's opinion and telling them, well, you can't do that. Well, have you thought about this, right? It gives you kind of are able to look at things from a different perspective, even when you're not in it in an everyday basis. So yeah, I think it's
Absolutely.
been instrumental for me.
Absolutely. Even I take that to heart. It's like the ethos of, I think a good leader is a person that can put themselves in the shoes of their team. And some of the best stories I've heard of fantastic leaders are the ones that when shit hit the fan, they were sleeping in the office alongside their brigade. And that's, I think, once your employees or the people that you work with can see that you as their superior can actually get work done and actually can pull your sleeves and can be right alongside them. I think that is worth way more than other like leadership qualities. So I love that. So, okay, I take it. So you were born in the Dominican Republic, right?
Yeah,
And the Colada shop is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a Cuban,
it
right?
is.
It's a Cuban
Yeah.
establishment. Tell me what was, when you were thinking of opening it in 2016, how did you come up with the concept? And where did you sneak Cuban into the
Yeah.
concept?
I'll start how, I came up. So at one point in my career prior to starting, I was doing a lot of consulting and actually a lot of consulting in Miami. So I would, and I could not wait, honestly, to land at the Miami airport because just like the smell of the strong coffee and the
Oh
guava
yeah.
and the things, I'm like, I miss dearly the flavors, right? So it was something I think that I really it was to me the best part of Miami, right? Like it really was that. It was that moment. And I was traveling a lot and I was traveling through many parts of the country. And because I was consulting, I didn't really have like an office in all these cities, right? So I would work out from a lot of cafes. And I really saw a huge space. It was like, oh my God, I can't even tell in what city I am most of the time. Like they all look the same. They're serving me kind of pretty similar products with very little identity, sometimes a bit of attitude dosed in. If you went to, the third wave coffee shops. And but I also realized like, okay, I'm here, I'm like typing away, I've had a couple meetings, it's like 1 o'clock, and now what? Right? Like now I kind of have to go, right? Because now it's lunchtime, I'm hungry. I don't want a muffin that you've had there since the morning. And like the experience didn't continue, but I wanted it to continue. I wanted to spend more money. Realistically, I didn't want to have to get up and leave. And so I saw a hole in that as well, right? And initially, actually, Colada Shop was the cover up to a speakeasy, if I'm honest, that me and my business partner were going to open. It wasn't even the concept that we were going with.
That's
It
pretty
was, we were
cool.
going to open a bar called La Obra,
Lauga.
which was,
What does
yeah, a
that stand
Cuban
for? What does that
speakeasy.
mean?
It's like the work of art, like the
Work of art.
masterpiece, actually, the masterpiece.
Masterpiece.
Yeah,
Lauga.
there is a ton of cocktail history when it comes to Cuba, especially during Prohibition, as everyone was kind of escaping the States and going to party in Cuba. And right, it's a huge cocktail culture. So that was the basis of the bar, and we were opening in 14th Street and the basement of this building, and where Colada, the first Colada shop opened, which is still there, is in 14th Street and T, which was kind of like the little side street. At the time, no one paying a lot of attention, but still, we had like 300 feet on that main floor. And we're like, well, we have to do something with this. And that's how Colada Shop was born. I'm like, okay, well, we're going to complement those cocktails with that guava pastry and strong coffee and even more of a more casual cocktail upstairs. So it was originally a pretty straightforward, it was small space, a pretty straightforward concept. Coffee, pastries, Cuban sandwiches, and empanadas, and then a handful of cocktails as well. And we opened, and there was a line for blocks. And we're like, wait a minute, what bar? What bar are we opening? Like, we clearly have something in our hands here. And it's like, I guess I wasn't the only one missing those flavors and
Authentic
that.
food. Hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's how kind of like it started. But I guess why Cuban, me Dominican? So, and I was traveling a lot to Miami with a number of Cuban close friends, but also, even though actually my grandmother, long story, born in Haiti, but from Cuban descent, actually, and then moved to Dominican Republic. So it is also part of my heritage, even though I've never lived in Cuba. I've been to Cuba, but I've never lived in Cuba. Yes. So it
Amazing.
was kind of
Amazing.
like kind of bringing it all home. And the thing I will say is that obviously with its differences, 100%, but they're both Cuba and the Dominican Republic were both colonized by the Spanish. So we and ultimately have the same raw ingredients on those islands. So kind of the interpretations of how that cuisines evolved in both islands is very similar.
I love
Yeah.
that.
So
I love that. And I've studied a little bit about the Cuban history, and a lot of the roots stem from Africa. So the flavors that they sort of evolved over the years, they still play homage to those traditional flavors that you find in Africa. What I find fascinating, what I really wanted to ask you about on this episode is what you call all day affair, right? I
mhm.
call it here in San Francisco, we call it third space, right? But you told me you're not the biggest fan of that term, but um,
Yeah.
that is quite a difficult concept to crack, right? How early do you open it in the morning, and what is your closing time? Like how long are you open per day?
Yeah. It's 7:30 to 10 p.m. and then 11 on the weekends. Yeah.
Got it. And so, do you see a spike? Where are most of your customers coming in? What time of the day? Is it in the morning, or do you actually see a pretty big spike in the evening time for the cocktails?
Yeah, so our that's our biggest spike actually. Our biggest spike is happy hour time along with lunch actually. But I would say if we look at it in spikes, even though it's for most locations it's pretty sustained, I would say it's like 9 a.m. and then definitely big pop between like noon and 2 and then start like 5 to 7 are kind of like our three pops during the day. But we see it as 5 meal periods. It's kind of like that early morning, then mid morning, lunch, mid afternoon, dinner. And they all behave differently. They all behave differently depending on which of our locations. But it is a difficult thing to crack. How do you keep a space engaged all day for people to think, hey, I am seeing this space for breakfast, but then I'm also having a cocktail here, right? So from when I opened, and like not anymore, but the original, Colada I designed, and it was something very, very important to me of like the how do we transition the space. So it with a lot of emphasis and focus on lighting, on music, into one of the biggest things that I was very adamant about what espresso machines would use because I'm like, I am not gonna go drink where a place that has a huge bulky espresso machine, then it automatically I cannot transform that, right? Like
Interesting.
I can't change that. So
Psychological, there's like a psychological effect that you see it as as a coffee shop. You don't see it as a place to go hang out in the evening time, a bar of some sort, right?
correct. So our espresso machines actually look, anyone could confuse them with beer tap handles, right? Like
It's pretty
they're just
cool.
very sleek. We use mod bars, very sleek. And now they're pretty common. At the time when we started this, not so much, right? So it was very intentional, like it's from the grab and goes, like we have them, but like how do we change the light or turn off the light when we switch over kind of more to the evening, the music. So the ambience piece is very critical. I don't think you can just have the same vibe from music to lighting to, again, just elements that are in your space that don't affect how you feel. Everything has an effect, right? It's all about the details, and
100%.
every detail is like much larger than you would expect on the impact that it has on how people behave. So it's how it makes you feel. So I think that's one of the key components of how we're able to transition our space to be an all day affair. And obviously, I would say also having the products to support that, right? Like you having a menu that truly has all the items to be a good place for breakfast, a good place for lunch, a good place for dinner on its own, right? I think what I try to see in these third spaces is like there seem to always be forcing one time of the day. It's kind of like
Tell me
I'll
more.
give the airport. I'll tell you like
Yeah.
kind of the airport. To me, airports are the perfect scenario. You have all these concepts, and like you can tell when they force them to serve breakfast, right?
Mm.
It's like, oh, you have to be open during the morning, and then they give you two crappy options that are like whatever, like that's not something that they do naturally. It's not ingrained in their concept. It's not ingrained in their DNA, right? So then they're forcing this because they're being made to open for a time period that's not really their time period, because they can grab some sales, but it doesn't feel natural, right? It always feels kind of lackluster. So I think that if you want to truly be successful in all these meal periods, then what you're serving in all these meal periods needs to be special at all meal periods. Not let me just put this in just to see if it sticks, and like it's just kind of like a lot, an afterthought. So I think that's also something that's very crucial and critical to me, like in how we're able to like again maintain an all day presence.
That I'm sure you're probably not the biggest fan of dining in Las Vegas, right? Because you don't even know what time of the day it is, and
No, I am
it feels
not.
very forced. And that's something I got from traveling, especially in Asia and Latin America. Breakfast is over when the banh mi trolley has left that corner, right? So you can sort of like section off the days based on what you see outside, right? And I think and remind me again, you're based in DC, the DMV
Mhm.
area, right? So
Correct.
you're dealing a lot with really busy people, right? I'm sure like everyone's always on the go, probably early morning, they're getting ready for work. And then at the end of the day, they're probably taking some time with friends. So you have to kind of think about your market, right? And how do your customers, what is their life like? What are their habits? What is the vibe of that area? So curious is that as you're planning to scale the Colada shop, are there any markets that you're looking at particularly that you think will be a good maybe like expansion for this concept? And are there markets that you just think, hell no, I will never go into it because the vibe of that particular city or state just doesn't match what I'm trying to build?
Yeah, I would say I never say never.
That's
That's
good.
one thing that I think you have to be kind of
You have to evolve.
open to, yeah, evolve. And, what my business is right now might look very different in 5 years, and that city might look very different in 5 years. So you never say never. But I would say one of the markets that I'm not looking into is Miami. I'll say that much, right? Just
Too
because
saturated?
there's a lot of saturation where like pretty much something that's completely absent in the rest of the country. So why go where there is again a lot of saturation and a lot of people saying, "Oh, my abuela does it this way," like so not really one that I'm like keen on right now and going into. I love the city, but just for that purpose. But definitely, actually, I would say warmer weather. So south, we're exploring some areas of Tennessee, some areas of Texas right now, actually, to head next. And reason being, I am from the Dominican Republic after all, but I think we just do so much better in warmer weather. I feel like everyone's just happier. The music flows better. The vibe flows
100%.
better, So I'm excited to head next to a place that we have just instead of 8 months out of the year where we can enjoy that 12 or at least 11. So I think those are the goals for next steps, but we're not closed off to really any market. I think really the Colada shop I see playing, nationwide. It really is a fun, vibrant concept and space, and that if you're in a very busy city, it allows you to have 5 minutes of vacation. If you're already in a city that feels like vacation, it's a continuation of it, right? So it really just kind of flows. And I want to make sure that wherever we take it next, it just continues to be its vibrant self.
That's a good strategy, right? It's also where I feel like you would be most happiest, right? If you're
Yeah.
attacking a market that's not as warm or fun. I feel like at this early stage, you got to prioritize where you feel like you'll be at your best self. So that's amazing. And what were some? I'm curious, like along the way, have you tried doing any experiments with the Colada shop concept, or maybe tried new items or different strategies that just like didn't really pan out? And how did you course correct and pivot along the way?
I would say a million every month of every year. One thing I will say is just like, at least to me, it's not a said and done. To make it long term in this industry in a such fast paced environment, like you have to be constantly evolving and having that desire to be better every day. So because of that, we're constantly innovating, changing things up. Sometimes it works amazingly, and sometimes it's a complete fail. And I think being able to recognize both of those things quickly is key, right? It's just like some things conceptually might seem like an amazing idea and they just then fail terribly, right? Or, and I'm happy to give an example. Like, we had expanded like our coffee sizes a while back, and we had regular, medium, and large. And at one point, we're like, let's remove the large, and the aim to achieve better consistency, right? In the coffee. But guess what? At the end of the day, then that same customer that was buying an $8 drink is now buying a $5 drink. They're not coming back and getting two $5 drinks, even if it might be a little bit better, right? But then we also notice like, is it really more inconsistent, or can we just actually fix that with additional training rather than like cutting off $3 of sales of someone that's already coming in and drinking that, right? So that was one that we quickly were like, you know what? No, like this is not working. Like, let's bring it back. What were we thinking? And we have at times menu items that I have done incredibly great. And we're like, okay, that's staying permanently, even though that was not the original intention. And, that we've kept and are like, okay, I guess this one can't leave. Right. And, we can tell pretty quickly. But even from the beginning, I think I mentioned to you, like when we started, it was a pretty straightforward concept. Like we were doing very, very limited menu. And as much as I loved it, it really didn't work. Why? Because we're not in New
Interesting.
York, right? Like we're not in New York. We're not in a
Right.
super saturated market. We depend
Right.
on repeat guests. And the products are fantastic, but how many times a week, realistically speaking, can you eat empanadas, right? Like if you want to
Every day.
also stay, exactly. But if you want to maintain some sort of health. So like recognizing those things and being like, okay, is it going to be tough to execute? Yes, but this is our market. This is what we kind of need to do. And started expanding our offerings to ultimately adapt to our guest needs, and I think when I get asked like, hey, why do you think so many restaurants fail? And I'm like, because restaurateurs and chefs and ultimately hospitality people are probably the most stubborn people ever, right? Myself included, but we're just stubborn people in general. And then we come up with these ideas, and some are amazing and fantastic, but we're not so great at times at listening and paying attention as to like the people that are actually paying the bills and are coming in and are your paying customers, what they want and what were you missing. So I think despite I remember at the time kind of like having a little bit of some heated arguments with our chefs of like, no, we need to expand and we need to like be able to meet this. And they weren't necessarily in agreement, but pushing that the team to make sure that we were able to do that. Not because I wanted to. It wasn't like a desire, okay, like I want to, but it's like, okay, this is what I need to do to survive within this market, right? And I think being able to, a word that after COVID obviously became very familiar to everyone, pivoting, right? You need to be able to pivot, you need to be able to adapt. And you adapt and learn and see like, hey, I put the, in another restaurant, we don't have host ends, but the host end here, but people are missing it or they're like looking around. Like you have to open your eyes when you have restaurants and spaces, even if you've done it a number of times, each space because behaves differently, right? It's not, you're not getting copy paste because even if it's exactly a replica of the space, it's not going to be a replica of the people. Right.
Right.
So how that neighborhood reacts to something might be completely different. And I think being able to adapt quickly is truly a key to success and being humble enough to accept, like, hey, this didn't work this time. Yeah.
Well, I can safely say that your restaurants are not replicas of one another. I think they're all uniquely beautiful and creative, and I think that you found yourself a very amazing concept with the drinks and the empanadas and the coffee. So you can sort of rotate and try different flavors and combinations. There's endless amounts of cocktails that you can make and you can push out and get feedback from your customers and drive repeat business. Same thing with the empanadas. I'm just thinking about my
Mhm.
friend is Argentine, and I went into his favorite empanada store, and they have like 50 or so empanadas that they rotate on a daily basis. So that's
Mhm.
amazing. Last question for you before we wrap up, because we can talk forever. What do your customers say about the Colada shop?
I think what I hear the most is that it's a piece like they feel like they're on vacation. And that to me is what makes me the happiest. That was my goal, really. It's just like when I'm here, it's just kind of like I forget where I am. And to me, that's just like we're giving them an experience. And ultimately, that's more than a product, right? It's not just like, oh, you have a great sandwich, a Cuban sandwich, you have a great mojito. It's like, I feel great here. And that's what I aim to continue to do as we grow and expand. I want, and, get people out of their homes and become that space where they can be all day. It's an extension of their home. Yeah. Without calling it a third space, just to be clear.
Exactly. You should run a campaign. This is not a third
Yeah.
space. It's an extension of your home. Daniela, thank you so
Yeah.
much. I wish you and the Colada shop nothing but the best. And I hope maybe one day you can come all the way to California, but I know that's far away and the market here
All right.
isn't so friendly, but I think we would enjoy your spirit and your energy here. So
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Never say never, though.
Never
I
say
love you
never.
there.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
You too.